lot of auto jobs coming. Watch what's happening. The companies are coming in by the tens. You got to see what's happening.
One thing's for sure. Cars are about to get more expensive in the U.S. Some may even be pulled from the market entirely.
If we see prices going up as a result of costs going up either on vehicles or parts, that means that the consumer is going to have a harder time affording these vehicles.
This is a big week for corporations to report their earnings. Today, General Motors said tariffs are hurting its bottom line.
Cadillac, a name that once rolled off the tongue like poetry, a name that meant elegance, prestige, and the unmistakable power of the American dream. For over 100 years, Cadillac wasn't just a car, it was a declaration from presidents and movie stars to hardworking Americans saving up for a taste of luxury. Cadillac stood tall as the very definition of status. Its cars weren't merely vehicles, they were moving monuments to what America promised the world: innovation, style, and unshakable confidence. But today that image of strength is being shattered. The brand that once dominated America's highways and driveways is now facing an unthinkable future, walking away from its own homeland. A 25% tariff introduced under Washington's aggressive trade war has hit Cadillac like a freight train. What used to be a national icon is now turning into a liability, trapped between bleeding profits and unbearable costs inside. Cadillac's boardrooms conversations, once filled with excitement about electric futures and global expansion, are now clouded by grim calculations. Executives are forced to discuss something that would have been unimaginable just 5 years ago: the possibility of abandoning U.S. production altogether. Even the Escalade, Cadillac's crown jewel, the SUV that defined the luxury American lifestyle, no longer has a guaranteed future in Texas. That's right, the ultimate symbol of American success may be forced to abandon American soil, and Cadillac's much-hyped electric revolution, the EV assembly lines that were once hailed as the brand's gateway to tomorrow, are stalling under the crushing weight of collapsed incentives, skyrocketing material costs, and the new tariffs. What was supposed to be Cadillac's rebirth is now teetering on the edge of collapse. The company is staring at a brutal choice: stay in America and bleed until bankruptcy, or move operations abroad in search of stability. But hey, race, the chilling part: this isn't just about Cadillac. If a brand with over a century of deep roots in Detroit is questioning its future in the U.S., what does that mean for Ford, for GM, for the entire American auto industry that once set the global standard? And make no mistake, the fallout isn't confined to corporate boardrooms. It's already hitting American families since April 3, 2025, when the 25% tariff kicked in. The cost of imported vehicles and critical components has skyrocketed. Analysts estimate that production costs for each Cadillac could rise anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 per car. That's not just a number on a balance sheet, that's a crushing blow to loyal buyers. Take the CT4 and CT5 sedans. Nearly half of their parts come from Mexico, meaning every single one of those cars now carries an invisible tax born not out of engineering brilliance but political warfare. And the Escalade EV, it relies on nearly a third of its components from South Korea, leaving it completely vulnerable to tariff crossfire. The result is sticker shock on the showroom floor. The Escalade, once marketed as the pinnacle of American luxury, now sits at nearly $94,000, almost $4,000 higher than last year. For average Americans, that price hike isn't just inconvenient, it's devastating. And for Cadillac, it may be the final push that forces the brand to abandon the land that gave it life. For many American families, what was once a dream purchase, the ultimate symbol of achievement parked proudly in the driveway, has suddenly slipped out of reach. A Cadillac, once the crown jewel of luxury and aspiration, is no longer attainable for thousands of loyal buyers. And if these tariffs remain in place, the question becomes chilling: how many more households will be priced out of the so-called American dream on wheels? Still with us? Then do us a favor, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next, because the story only gets darker from here. If sticker shock rattled Cadillac's customers, the collapse of its electric ambitions has shaken the very foundation of the brand itself. What was once pitched as Cadillac's salvation, its bold pivot to electric vehicles that promised to secure relevance in a changing market, has instead turned into a case study in corporate failure. By December 2025, General Motors made a stunning announcement: production of the Lyriq and Celestiq, Cadillac's flagship EVs, would be halted at its Tennessee plant less than a year into what was meant to be Cadillac's rebirth. The assembly lines went silent, and the trouble didn't stop there. During the first 5 months of 2026, one Entire production shift was scrapped, slashing capacity and sending output into a tailspin for the thousands of workers on those lines. It wasn't just a paycheck that vanished, it was the future they'd been promised, a future of innovation, stability, and relevance in the electric age. Suddenly, that promise looked like a mirage, and the policy environment only made things worse. The Trump administration's rollback of the $7,500 federal tax credit for EV buyers effectively yanked the rug out from under Cadillac's strategy. Without that incentive, consumer enthusiasm collapsed overnight, sales dried up, inventory piled high in dealerships, and the vehicles that were supposed to carry Cadillac into the future instead began gathering dust on showroom floors. Infrastructure failures deepened the crisis. Charging networks remained patchy and unreliable, leaving many potential buyers skeptical about making the leap into electric. Cadillac's daring bet on electrification, once hailed as its boldest move in decades, has now been exposed as a gamble that backfired spectacularly. Instead of saving the brand, it drained billions in investment and pushed Cadillac closer to an existential cliff. And so the question lingers, if even Cadillac, with its century of heritage, brand recognition, and GM's deep pockets, cannot secure a foothold in America's electric future, what hope is left for the rest of the U.S. auto industry to compete on the global stage? Even Cadillac's crown jewel hasn't been spared. The Escalade, the embodiment of American excess, success, and swagger, is packing up its legacy in Texas and heading north. By 2027, production will leave GM's Arlington, Texas plant, a facility once synonymous with stability, and shift back to Michigan as part of a $4 billion investment in gas-powered SUVs and pickups. On paper, the move looks strategic. Consolidating production in Michigan allows GM to cut costs and shield itself from at least some of the tariff shocks ravaging its supply chains. But beneath the surface, the decision tells a different story, one of retreat, not progress. The Escalade EV, with nearly 30% of its components sourced from South Korea, was especially vulnerable to the tariff net. In the end, even Cadillac's most iconic nameplate was forced to compromise, abandoning its electric future in favor of clinging to the past rather than doubling down on electrification. Cadillac has chosen what it sees as the safer route: lean harder into gasoline-powered models that are less exposed to volatile international supply chains. But make no mistake, this isn't just a logistical pivot, it's a message. Cadillac is signaling that it values short-term profitability over long-term innovation, retreating into familiar ground while the rest of the global auto industry accelerates toward an electric future. For Texas, the loss cuts deeper than economics. It's a wound to identity, Arlington's pride. The Escalade is Michigan's gain, but the trade-off exposes just how fragile America's industrial geography has become, reshaped not by market demand but by political decisions. What does it say about the future of U.S. auto manufacturing when Cadillac, a brand built on resilience, must abandon Texas just to survive? And the fallout doesn't end with cars or factories. It's reaching directly into the homes of thousands of American families. In Arlington, the GM plant, employing more than 5,000 workers, now stands on unstable ground. For decades, that facility wasn't just an assembly line, it was a lifeline. Generations of Texans earned their living there, forging not only Cadillacs but the backbone of middle-class security. Today, that security hangs by a thread. The mayor of Arlington has already sounded the alarm, describing these tariffs as nothing less than job-killing policy. His warning echoes the anxiety of communities who can see the writing on the wall. Cadillac's shrinking output, combined with the relocation of the Escalade, places thousands of paychecks in jeopardy. And it's not just the line workers who are at risk. The economic pain ripples outward to suppliers, truck drivers, diners, barbershops, and corner stores that all depend on steady wages flowing through their city. Even General Motors' own leadership admits the danger. The company's CFO has cautioned that if tariffs remain in place, shifting operations out of Arlington won't be a choice, it will be a necessity. At the same time, Cadillac's retreat from electric vehicles doesn't just erase cars from production lines, it erases thousands of high-tech jobs that were supposed to secure America's place in the global EV race. It's a brutal irony. A policy designed to protect American workers is piece by piece dismantling their livelihoods, and behind it all lies Cadillac's greatest vulnerability, its once celebrated integrated supply chain. For over half a century, the North American American auto industry thrived on. Seamless cooperation between the US, Canada, and Mexico. It was efficient, it was competitive, it was the model of modern globalization, but tariffs have twisted that strength into a crushing liability. Look at Cadillac's lineup. The CT4 and CT5 sedans rely on nearly half of their components from Mexico. The XT5 and XT6 source about 35%, while the XT4 depends on roughly 25% under normal conditions. That system kept prices low and production steady. Today, every microchip, every imported part has become a tax burden. Cadillac cannot escape. Experts call it a nightmare, a bureaucratic maze of tracing and taxing that inflates costs while doing almost nothing to protect the American jobs it was supposed to save. Some call it pragmatism, others call it madness, punishing the very system that once gave American automakers their edge. Trapped between politics and economics, Cadillac now finds itself in a no-win situation. Follow the rules and profits bleed away, and the risks multiply either way. The brand's global competitiveness erodes, forcing Cadillac to confront a brutal question: has Made in America turned into a curse instead of a promise? Faced with mounting pressure, General Motors has chosen what looks, at least on paper, like the safest path forward, but in reality it may prove to be the most dangerous gamble of all. Instead of doubling down on electrification, GM is pouring $4 billion into gas-powered SUVs and pickups, wagering that short-term stability will outweigh long-term risks for Cadillac. This strategy means retreating into the familiar, leaning harder on gasoline juggernauts like the Escalade rather than staking its future on the electric revolution. At first glance, the plan makes sense. Gasoline models are less exposed to volatile tariffs, easier to sell in the American heartland, and faster to convert into profit. But beneath the surface, the deeper consequences are undeniable. Cadillac is drifting further away from the global automotive current. While Europe sets aggressive carbon-neutral targets and Asia races ahead with electrification at scale, Cadillac is tethering itself to a future that may soon look obsolete. The very vehicles that protect the brand today could render it irrelevant tomorrow, and unlike Toyota, Volkswagen, or Hyundai, Cadillac lacks the global footprint to hedge its bets. This inward turn is compounded by Cadillac's overwhelming dependence on the US market. By tying its fate so tightly to domestic demand, GM has made the brand dangerously vulnerable to political turbulence. A single tariff announcement from Washington can now upend years of planning, erasing billions in investment overnight, destabilizing entire communities in the process. So the dilemma sharpens: does Cadillac cling desperately to the American market, praying that policy eventually swings in its favor, or does it take the bold, unsettling step of moving production offshore to safeguard its survival? The choice could determine whether Cadillac remains a contender in the global auto race or fades into history as another cautionary tale of American decline. Because make no mistake, the fall of Cadillac would not simply mark the collapse of one storied brand, it would echo as a warning across the entire U.S. auto industry. What began as a proud emblem of American luxury and ingenuity has now become the face of how protectionism can backfire instead of securing jobs and industry. Tariffs have turned Cadillac into a living symbol of policy failure. The shock waves extend far beyond Detroit, from the factory floors of Texas to the dealerships of California, from parts suppliers in Ohio to port workers in New Jersey. Confidence in America's industrial backbone is fracturing. Meanwhile, Canada, Mexico, and Europe stand ready to seize the opportunities America has left on the table, offering stability where U.S. policy has sown chaos. And so the question remains: if Cadillac, a century-old nameplate with global prestige and the weight of General Motors behind it, cannot survive under America's new trade regime, what hope is left for other U.S. automakers still caught in the same storm? This isn't just about cars, it's about America's place in the global economy. It's about the unraveling of an industrial legacy, and it's about whether the American dream, once parked proudly in driveways across the nation, can withstand the political storms now threatening to drive it off the road. So the question hangs in the air: will policymakers continue down this path, one that risks driving America's most iconic brands into exile, or will they finally recognize the devastating cost of these decisions before the damage becomes irreversible? Cadillac's crisis isn't just about one automaker, it's a mirror reflecting the fragility of America's industrial future. If this video gave you something to think about, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It's the best way to support this channel and make sure these stories reach more people who need to hear them. time, and now we want to hear from you. Do you think Cadillac can survive in America's new auto landscape, or is the brand destined to become another casualty of policy gone wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start the conversation.